This epidemic and its devastating impact is being felt all across the country, from big cities to suburbs and small towns. Now, Florence is currently a powerful Category 4 hurricane. Here in Kensington, a local pastor is bringing community groups together. Well, guys, she did give me that Stella stare.
How was that?
Yeah. Stella stare.
Like into your soul.
My advice this morning to folks busy searching through all those listings is to take a deep breath. For anyone heading out this morning, when we say drenching
torrential
rain,
downpours.
Very serious. This particular drug and going through this is unprecedented. Have you seen this type of situation in your practice? This has really been an extraordinary midterm election with a lot of folks very energized and eager to vote nationally and locally. And the turnout, well, it apparently did not disappoint. She's an expert in breast and gynecological cancer, and she's focusing on health disparities. Now to Capitol Hill, where the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to vote today on whether to recommend Brett Kavanaugh to the nation's highest court. Squiggles, come on down. There you are.
Hi, Squiggles. How are you?
Good morning.
We're talking about some of the pretty smart, snazzy phones that are out there right now, those smartphones that are among the holiday gift favorites again this year. Their story. That's next. Stay with us. Right, a very big surprise indeed. Mrs. Obama was in Philadelphia as part of her tour, Becoming, an intimate conversation with Michelle Obama. Now, the surprise was for 12 high school students before last night's event when she quietly walked into the room. Well, Mrs. Obama making that surprise at the African American Museum in Philadelphia, literally keeping some of the young ladies speechless. There were tears and hugs, and the First Lady gave plenty of encouraging words, including inspiration about dealing with life's transitions and overcoming your fears during their own private roundtable session.
So you don't miss college because of a few moments of fear, right? You don't miss travel because of the little discomfort that you're going to feel. And now that I'm 54 years old, transitions aren't frightening to me.
Well, Mrs. Obama there provided copies of her book and a ticket for each of the students to her event at the Wells Fargo Center. And her popularity with fans has translated into huge book sales. Becoming, released just over 2 weeks ago, is a big hit. Bookseller Barnes & Noble saying that it already had the biggest first week sales of any book this year. Now, last night, thousands filled the Wells Fargo Center to see the former First Lady up close. Well, certainly a rock star-like welcome there for the former First Lady in South Philadelphia. Comedian Phoebe Robinson was the moderator for the big night there, and Mrs. Obama will be in Brooklyn tomorrow for another stop of her tour. There she will also be heading to 24 cities right after that, even including, Nick, London and Paris. So a real whirlwind, and I'd say a lot of books sold on this tour as well. But the girls, they loved it. Breast cancer is a disease that impacts many in our local communities and across the country. In fact, experts say 1 in 8 women will have breast cancer in her lifetime. And they say this year, nearly 269,000 new cases of breast cancer are expected to be diagnosed in women in the United States. We start with a look at research happening at the Wistar Institute in Philadelphia, where we sit down with a doctor who, after getting her medical degree in China, decided to change her career path, switching from treating patients to basic research with a singular goal: to have a better understanding of cancer, to provide effective treatments, and perhaps one day a cure.
You see the media already turning into yellow, right?
Her name is Ching Chen, and she is a doctor at the Wistar Institute who has been funding her own research through grants for 4 years. And now, about 20 years into her career, she says one huge question still remains. Why isn't there a cure for breast cancer yet, especially when billions of dollars are reportedly donated and allocated toward breast cancer research each year in the United States? A critically important answer, she explains, lies in the complexity of the disease.
Cancer is very, very complicated, and then breast cancer is even more complicated. Every time We think we find a new therapy, find a new angle, and the cancer cell somehow figure out a way to bypass that. The vessel is actually the vessel from the brain.
Her research at the nonprofit Research Institute focuses on how cancer cells, the cells that become abnormal and mutate, leave their original position in the breast and then spread to different organs in the body. Her particular focus, how breast cancer metastasizes or spreads to the brain.
The most common size of the metastasis for breast cancer is lung, bone, liver, and brain. So I'm particularly interested in the brain metastasis because it is a very, very difficult problem in clinic. You can imagine the brain is the best protective organ of your body, which is good for your brain, but at the same time, it's very hard for any kind of a drug to get into the brain. This is what we feed the cancer cell in the
It's here in her laboratory at Wistar in University City that Dr. Chen easily spends 50 hours a week on her research. In it, a small room with carefully monitored and regulated equipment houses live breast cancer cells that are kept at the Institute in conjunction, Chen says, with strict protocols. The cells in a special fluid are not visible to the naked eye, but under a microscope are magnified, and Chen says in one small container number into the tens of thousands. This is a cancer cell versus a healthy cell. So what are the keys to a cure for breast cancer? According to Dr. Chen, first, prevention. Chen says that it's multifaceted, involving many aspects, including family history, environment, and lifestyle. But she says it is still what researchers are striving for.
We have to understand what kind of population of patients will have breast cancer. Can we prevent that?
Also key to a cure, Chen says, is early detection through the use of tools like mammography. And she says more specialized therapies to better protect a patient's body and healthy cells while eradicating cancer cells at the same time.
So in that words, is can we just only targeting on the cancer cell, only treat the cancer cell without damaging the rest of your body? Look exactly like this.
And Dr. Chen says while the potential for the spread of cancer in a patient remains a big concern, she says there is good news.
We're very happy with the advances in terms of controlling the early stage of breast cancer. We're very happy about that, and survival rate is over 90%. Even though it's difficult, but there's a lot of hope there. And then we just need to work together and then just eventually try to win this battle.
At Jefferson Health's Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center, we sit down with Dr. Ana Maria Lopez. She's an expert in breast and gynecological cancer, and she's focusing on health disparities. Here's why.
I really knew that I wanted to be taking care of adult patients.
Dr. Ana Maria Lopez has been an oncologist for more than 20 years. At her office in Philadelphia at Jefferson Health Sidney Kimmel Cancer Center, she talked about the types of challenges a cancer diagnosis can bring.
And I've had another patient who said, I promised my daughter I would get her through high school. And to do that, I have to choose. Do I get treatment now, or do I get her through high school? Those are tough decisions that patients are making. So tell us about the skin.
Dr. Lopez treats patients and separately is working on cancer research with several of her colleagues. She says those conversations with patients about tough decisions they are facing aren't ones that she shies away from. In fact, it's part of the reason she says she's so drawn to the profession of cancer care.
I really liked both the physical and the emotional intensity of taking care of cancer patients. You know, it's very intellectually stimulating. There's a lot that we don't know, but it also requires a lot of compassion and requires a lot of being there for patients.
Her patients and her new research happening on health disparities and cancer in our region. It's work she's hopeful will one day play a part in a key to a cure for all sorts of cancers, including breast cancer.
In this part of Pennsylvania, parts of Delaware, and parts of New Jersey. And we know already that longevity differs, that, you know, certain parts, that your zip code can actually predict your lifespan. And what I'd like to look at is in what way do these disparities impact cancer outcomes.
Dr. Lopez says the data would be collected voluntarily with the goal of working in partnership with the community. She says this could help to better identify populations of people for doctors to work more closely with regarding their health.
Let's say there's a zip code where people, since access to care in the United States is very much linked to health insurance, where people are less insured. And if in that area there's less insurance, it's likely that folks in that zip code will have less mammography. If there's less mammography, there's likely to be diagnoses of breast cancer at a later stage.
But with better access to care and prevention in mind as keys to a cure, she sees such partnerships as helping communities implement exercise programs. That's important because she says 60% of cancers are preventable with lifestyle changes.
Walking groups are not a cost to anyone. Community gardens. Now there will be some cost related to that, and that's why I think it's so important to work with communities.
So Dr. Lopez, what am I seeing here?
So this is part of the equipment that does the analysis for the circulating tumor cells.
Inside this lab at the Cancer Center, Dr. Lopez and one of her colleagues show the area and equipment where they are researching circulating tumor cells, or cancer cells she says are floating in the body.
So it could be that this becomes a clue to start treatment earlier.
While researchers continue their work on developing new therapies for breast cancer, Dr. Lopez adds that clinical trials are also atop her list as a key to a cure.
Sometimes there are clinical trials that impact the management of that patient's disease. Sometimes there are clinical trials that are not really going to impact that patient's illness, but will be helpful to the future. But that's how we make progress.
Until more of that progress leads to a cure, Dr. Lopez has a word to the wise that she says applies to essentially all of us.
You only have to walk out into the street to feel stress in many situations. And certainly people driving are very stressed. So really thinking about stress. So eating well, physical activity. I tell my patients, these are all the things our mothers taught us. You know, eat well, sleep well, find joy.
Breast Cancer, Keys to a Cure with Jennifer Lewis Hall.
We're back with more of our special program, Breast Cancer Keys to a Cure. Here in Camden, New Jersey, we meet the medical director of the MD Anderson Cancer Center at Cooper. She's been an oncologist for nearly 30 years and is also a breast cancer survivor.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling well.
No symptoms?
No symptoms.
Bone pain, headache, shortness of breath, nothing?
Nothing.
Dr. Generosa Grana has been the medical director of MD Anderson Cancer Center at Cooper in Camden for 6 years. She does follow-ups regularly with patients, including Erica Hauer, a nurse who is a wife and mother of 3 daughters from Sicklerville, New Jersey.
So far, so
Great
good.
place.
Yes, coming up on 2 years. So.
The questions and answers shared between this doctor and patient in this moment may sound routine, but it is what these women have in common that has individually changed the lives of these 2 medical professionals forever. Both were diagnosed with breast cancer, and both are breast cancer survivors.
Oh, it's very personal. So I was personally affected by breast cancer 9 years ago, so I am very familiar with what this means. And I was very fortunate. I had very early disease, incredibly fortunate. But it taught me so much about my interaction with my patients. It taught me so much about what a patient goes through as they're waiting for that diagnosis, as they're waiting for that biopsy, as they're waiting for those results.
Because I had triple negative, it's a different kind of cancer that really only responds to chemotherapy. So I had chemotherapy first, followed by surgery. And I was lucky enough that I did not need radiation, but I did have 16 rounds over 5 months of chemotherapy. So
Hauer shared the painstaking moments with me, from telling her children she had breast cancer to the moments that she started losing her hair.
my 10-year-old said, "It's not cancer though, right?" And then that was it. And then there was just like guttural screams after that because I said, well, actually it is. Your eyelashes, your eyebrows, the hair on your arms, everything, every shred, every follicle is gone. Every piece of hair is gone.
Dr. Grana says intensely emotional stories like ours and her own experience as a breast cancer survivor have made her even more passionate about her profession and her mission to try and find a key to a cure for the disease.
Now we know that there are probably 6 to 10 subtypes of breast cancer. They behave differently. They have different responsiveness to drugs. And our understanding is just exploding as we learn about this disease. So it is a very complex disease, and also it evolves.
And with that evolution, the doctor says one important key to a cure is cutting-edge research that involves various institutions and experts collaborating in a coordinated way together.
Multiple myeloma is a different disease. There's been tremendous advances in multiple myeloma that have been successful because a group got researchers together, funders together, and we've identified a whole new group of drugs and really made a tremendous headway.
And she believes there must be more participation in clinical trials.
You can have all the clinical trials in the world going on, but you need the physicians to be committed to enrolling patients on those trials, and you need to have patients that are willing to be involved. Erica was such a patient. We learn about drugs that are very effective or drugs that are not effective at all.
And she adds that an additional focus on underrepresented communities is key.
It's a big deal because underrepresented communities tend to not have the same access to services, whether it be screening services or treatment. And as a result, cancers tend to be diagnosed at later stages. Patients tend not to do as well. We know that although African American women have a lower risk of developing breast cancer, they have a higher risk of dying of the disease. And some of that is access to good cutting-edge care. They tend to have less participation in clinical trials. So as you find new treatments, are those treatments effective in all populations or just subsets of populations?
A big hurdle still, however, is finding out what really causes the disease. Until then, Dr. Grana says important breakthroughs are happening.
We know that certain genes predispose a woman to develop breast cancer. BRCA1 and BRCA2 are the two big genes that put a woman at great risk. Angelina Jolie really put those genes on the map when she came out with her story. But we now have another 7 to 8 genes that have different levels of risk. And we now have tests that test for up to 20 to 40 genes that give us some idea of risk.
Everything.
That's what you're
For Erica, finding that key to a cure can't come soon enough.
Not so much for me, but for my children or my grandchildren or my great-grandchildren. It's the future generations. You know, I dealt with what I had to deal with, and I would deal with it 100 times over if there were to find a cure that my children don't have to deal with it or my grandchildren. So that's the most important thing for me, is that getting closer to finding something for future generations.
Coming up next on Breast Cancer Keys to a Cure, a panel of experts. Stay with us for that.
We are back with Voices Rising, Solutions to the Opioid Epidemic on PHL 17.
Here in Kensington, a local pastor is bringing community groups together. He says it is key in combating the opioid crisis.
Yes, this is Emma Street. This is also one of the 4 bridges that people came to as a result of being pushed out from Gurney Street. Emma Street poses a different problem, or more of a more aggressive here on Emma Street. Here you have drug dealing, you have prostitution, you have local drug dealers that have targeted and are constantly preying on these people. They have claimed territory, and even the police. They come through here with extreme caution.
The pain, the devastation, and the dangers of the opioid epidemic gripping the nation clearly present on Emerald Street and along parts of another well-known street just a block away.
This is an encampment here right on Frankfort Avenue.
Driving through the Kensington neighborhood in Philadelphia with Reverend Richard Harris Sr., pastor of Firm Hope Baptist Church, he shares on this warm fall day how the opioid crisis has had a profoundly chilling impact on this community and its residents.
The population is becoming more younger and younger that are users, and record shows, especially with the opioid and with the availability of being able to get them from their doctors from the farmers. And the ease availability, that's another contributor to the growth of it. So I don't think it has peaked, and I don't think it's going to peak.
But he hasn't lost the will to fight this battle. Harris, who does drug counseling in Kensington, shares openly that he knows a lot about it personally because he himself was addicted to drugs for 8 years.
It started early in my teenage years with alcohol, and then started with speed, and that crossed over into cocaine. And I relate that because, again, there go I, but by God's grace.
And that message of grace that Harris has shared many times resonated with Rodney Walker. He's one of the many volunteers and community leaders who meet at Firm Hope to discuss community issues and provide resources. Walker says what Harris told him and others in the grip of addiction 2.5 years ago helped to save his life.
I heard this gentleman shared his story and some great wisdoms, and I was totally taken. I was totally because he shared almost my story.
Walker, now drug-free, is 53, but he doesn't hesitate to mention that his many bouts with drugs spanned 43 years of his life. Walker says it started with alcohol and marijuana in his teenage years.
And then it became pills, speed, meth, and it progressed on from there. Then it went through the 80s and 90s. It became cocaine, then crack cocaine. Through some injuries, I got introduced into opiates. And from there, I went on from there to go into a harder opiate, which was heroin. One day I found myself laying on my back and a bunch of paramedics standing over top of me. That was the first time I died.
But Walker has lived to tell his story and is helping others. Gloria Cartagena, meantime, a 25-year resident of Kensington and a block leader, hopes to hear more stories of recovery where she lives. Her organization focuses on cleaning up the streets and helping those who are dealing with homelessness, while also trying to help reduce the dangers that she says children in particular in the area are facing.
Drugs, needles, mainly the needles. That's our concern because of the children in the area. So what we're trying to do is try to get that bad rap out of Kensington and let them know there's some good people here that really care. And we're trying to beautify and get it back to what it was.
New apartments and housing sprouting up throughout parts of the area are among clear signs of an emphasis on that renewal in Kensington. But grave statistics on the opioid epidemic and the view by some experts that the crisis still hasn't peaked makes changing how some people view Kensington challenging.
No, it does hurt. There are certain folks who clearly only want to communicate that Kensington is a place of hopelessness. But that's not the whole story. Kensington is a vibrant place, a place of strength.
But helping, according to Reverend Harris, are a number of initiatives by the city, including to reduce overdoses, increase treatment options, and reduce the number of people who are unsheltered. And he believes his faith calls him to reach as many people as possible in person who are struggling.
We walk them all the major areas that are hardest hit with the homeless situation, with the drug use. Build a small, quick rapport with them. How long have they been out there? How's their family? What were some of the triggers? What were some of the things that led them into that path of life? Sometimes I share my own story with them.
His own story, and sometimes a prayer.
You know, whether they be Catholics or Baptists or Lutheran, a lot of them have had or brought up in some spiritual practice, some faith, say faith aspects. And many of them still have a deep-seated belief in the Lord. And we find out that majority of these people are not bad people. Majority of these people have, their conscience is still active, they still have a heart, and it's the addiction that's their biggest problem.
Next, we head back to our PHL 17 studios for a town hall on Voices Rising, Solutions to the Opioid Epidemic. Stay with us for that.